Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 5th of February 2018, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me in the studio today, Patrick Henningsen from 21st Century Wire. Welcome to the programme, Patrick.
Great to be with you, Mike.
Right, we're going to get straight on with Brexit negotiations, which begin the second major tranche of Brexit negotiations begins tomorrow. And they're going to begin with some technical sessions. They're going to discuss withdrawal issues, which is around governance. And the key thing is Ireland, Northern Ireland border, because, of course, this morning, all the mainstream media today, Patrick, talking about Theresa May and David Davis saying that Britain will categorically leave the customs union after Brexit. No doubt about it, but they haven't explained how that's going to work with regard to the Northern Irish border. Well, her colleague, her Conservative colleague, Kawai Kwarteng, whatever, however you pronounce the name, apologies for that, has told the Today programme this morning that there needs to be some distinction between customs union and non-customs union areas, but we don't need to worry, there's not going to be a hard border. So it's not clear how that's going to work. Of course, as we pointed out on the programme last week, Patrick, the European Commission has published their expectations from this round of negotiations. And what they were recommending was that the issue of the Irish border be split out into a completely separate strand. But to make a statement to say that Britain will be absolutely out of the customs union seems like nonsense to me, because everybody else in Europe has said that any possibility of a hard border is absolutely not on the table. And the Unionist Party, of course, upon which Theresa May relies to stay in government, has also said that a hard border is not possible because and that there should be no difference in rules between one part of the United Kingdom and another. So as we move forward, we seem to be moving backwards every day.
Well, what I'm going to ask, Mike, is if the UK intends to continue trading with Europe, with European countries, why abandon the customs union? What's the advantage?
Their argument is that if Britain were to stay in the customs union, that Britain could not negotiate trade deals with other countries. And of course, Britain wants to be hashtag Global Britain. We want to have bilateral trade deals with every country on the planet. And then a bilateral trade deal with the European Union, and then in the future, then we can start merging those together. But they're saying that in the meantime, we shouldn't be part of the customs union because that would cause problems with these other trade negotiations. So it's an interesting scenario that we face, and it's going to be interesting to see how it works out over the next few weeks. But of course, this next round of negotiations is really about the interim period, the transition period. Of course, we are negotiating the transition period without actually know what we're transitioning to. Works well, doesn't it?
It's going to be really a good excuse to sort of abandon the whole process in about a year's time.
I think that's very likely.
Yes, order through chaos. Order
through chaos, right. Now, in the meantime, of course, the European Union federalising itself as quickly as it possibly can, and well, this issue of sovereign bond-backed securities has been on the cards for a few months, but it's been in the press at the end of last week again. This is the idea that the European Central Bank, under its European Systemic Risk Board, high-level task force on safe assets, and led by the governor of the Irish Central Bank, Philip Lane, that they are proposing to securitise sovereign debt, so this is sovereign bonds, from the Eurozone countries into what they're describing as sovereign bond-backed securities. These would be bought by a special purpose vehicle, depending on the country's GDP and not depending on the country's debt, and packaged into these sovereign bond-backed securities in what they're describing as senior, mezzanine and junior classes, and sold to the markets. This reminds me very much of the mortgage crisis and subprime mortgages. That's basically what's going on here. But what many people, City of London, others have welcomed the idea. Others within Europe, including in Germany, are criticising it. But what's behind this? Well, what is behind it is the possibility of creating a European debt agency. a European debt agency. So at the moment, national governments issue their own debt, they manage their own debt, but along with banking union and fiscal union, we need debt union as well, and that's what looks like is on the cards here. So a European debt agency, we take all the national debt, all the bond issues from all the nations, we package them all together, we securitize them, we sell them on the markets, and we manage that debt from a centrally controlled, federalised European debt agency. That appears to be what is on the cards.
So banking union is effectively debt union when you break it.
Well, it's one aspect
down.
of it, yes,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And just to remind everybody, of course, just before Christmas, Donald Tusk warning all the other Eurozone countries that if any Eurozone country was to get in the way of banking union by June 2018, that he would be naming and shaming them publicly.
I was just going to say one thing to look out for in this is whenever you have the government involved in, or a government involved in managing the economy in this way, what you see, there's a feeding frenzy. Normally at the beginning is those who get in on the ground level of this particular, could we call it a Ponzi scheme, they're going to be going after aggressively to profit from the first round of whatever the issuance is. And so that's where the big money is made, right at the beginning. And after that, then when there's losses and there's a disaster, maybe even a financial collapse, Mike, then the governments are going to be asked to bail out the institutions who did some risky financial instrument gambling. And I can see that happening here. I would be surprised. It's too good of an opportunity to pass up, Mike.
Okay, let's head over to Syria, Patrick. And of course, the news that a Russian Su-25 was shot down yesterday. Give us the background on this.
This is an unfortunate incident which happened over the weekend. This is, yes, exactly, a Sukhoi 25 combat jet was shot down over Idlib by a man-pad or rocket-propelled, not shoulder-propelled, but portable.
Shoulder-fired.
Portable missile system.
Yeah.
This one might actually be on a tripod. But shot down this Russian plane. This is supposed to be a de-escalation zone, but as you can see, it's going to be an escalation zone now. The pilot ejected, was then hunted down by terrorists from a faction of the Free Syrian Army. And so by Geneva Convention rules, pilots that eject are not meant to be hunted down and killed. So anyway, the pilot apparently ran for a distance until he couldn't go any further and had his Russian Army machine gun pistol issued and put up a fight, and then apparently detonated a grenade when the terrorists had descended on him. So there's no Black Hawk Down moment for this pilot, Mike. So you could say he died with honor. He was awarded the highest medal possible in the Russian Federation. And it's sad, but it's just going to mean, I think there's going to be a slight escalation. We've already seen retaliatory strikes in the works.
Well, indeed. In fact, the last I saw was 3 sets of retaliatory strikes and about 60, 70 terrorists killed so far. Of course, well, let's look at what Dmitry Peskov had to say. He's the Kremlin spokesperson, concerned about the possible use and availability of manpads to the terrorists in Idlib. He said that when President Vladimir Putin spoke about the completion of the active stage of the operation to support the armed forces of Syria in their counter-terrorism work, he said that the ready and remaining potential of the Russian armed forces in the area of their temporary deployment is sufficient to conduct devastating retaliation. We're talking about exactly such surgical strikes today. The strikes were provoked by a tragic accident when our plane was shot down by terrorists. The pilot died, a hero. We all offer our condolences to the pilot's relatives and family and friends and are proud of our heroes. Naturally, this tragic incident was followed up by decisive action to suppress terrorist activity, and I would imagine that's going to continue. Mm-hmm. Now, you pointed out to me today, Patrick, that somebody had told you that listening to the World Service, BBC World Service today, that they had not used the term terrorist. They'd used a different word, assailant.
Yesterday, yes. So this might be radio or TV, I'm not sure. But they used the word assailant when describing the terrorists who shot down this particular aircraft. So That was was posted on my Facebook page. And of course, they asked the natural question: where did the terrorists get the equipment to shoot down this aircraft?
Somebody in the chat box pointing out saying that John McCain had said he would get man pads to these people in Syria.
John McCain didn't just say he was going to get man pads. He insisted that the United States government provide man pads. So I think there's your culprit right there. I think we can lay responsibility at the feet of John McCain, not just for these arms, but for many others. But this is a big story in itself. The U.S. Arming terrorists in Syria. This is well documented.
And in the meantime, another day, another alleged chemical attack. This time in East Ghouta.
Okay,
which is the eastern part of Damascus, and of course this video has come out. And who is the starring role in this?
Let me guess. Is it the white helmets?
It is indeed. So there you go. This apparently is a chlorine gas attack carried out on the besieged rebel-held enclave on the outskirts of Damascus. Well, Alistair Burt, the Minister for the Middle East, said the UK is deeply concerned by the 3 reports of chlorine attacks by the Syrian regime forces in eastern Ghouta so far in 2018. If it's confirmed that the regime has used chlorine, it would be yet another appalling example of the Assad regime's blatant disregard for both the Syrian people and its legal obligation not to use chemical weapons. Russia's repeated vetoes, which ended the UN Security Council mandate on joint investigative mechanism, risk sending a dangerous signal to the Syrian regime that it can use chemical weapons with impunity. The unrelenting airstrikes and violence by the regime and its backers in eastern Ghouta and Idlib continue to... He's clearly got some kind of nervous tic because every 5 words is the word regime.
Regime.
So anyway, it went on. Vanessa's point to me this morning was that this is absolutely insane. It's impossible that the military are in the area, that the Russians are in the area. They're not going to risk. Nobody is going to risk letting off a chlorine bomb in an area where you've got your own personnel, and so this is a military zone.
Plus, chlorine munitions are unconventional. And so the evidence that we have seen previously in Syria with regards to chlorine ammunition are makeshift chlorine bombs and munitions made from industrial chlorine tablets after the terrorists captured a chlorine factory that they use for water treatment, municipal water services around Syria. They took over that, and after that you saw the chlorine attacks. That's also well documented. And so it's, in terms of this chemical weapons talking point, it's just gotten beyond a joke.
It's
right
like
now.
Russiagate. They can't think of anything else to say, so they keep rehashing the same old narrative.
More chemical weapons, yeah right.
And speaking of Russiagate, let's move to that because, of course, the Nunes memo was out on Friday. Everybody knows what's in it by now. Trey Gowdy was speaking yesterday to various Sunday morning television interview programs, and Washington Times here reporting his suggestion that the FBI concealed Clinton's role in the Steele dossier. He also said that judges wouldn't have authorized and repeatedly renewed a warrant to spy on Carter Page if it hadn't been for the material in the Christopher Steele dossier and so on. So where do you see this going, Patrick?
I see it just going into a kind of a media argument. The Democrats are already putting forward their counter alternative memo, they're calling it. And so what they're doing is trying to flood the conversation with lots of noise, lots of confusion. And so people in the media will have a hard time focusing in on the issues. The majority of the media in America is definitely pro-Clinton, anti-Trump, pro-deep state. So they're not going to want to talk about anything that's in the Nunes memo. But what the Nunes memo does so well, which we discussed yesterday, is it boils down and filters out all this noise. So you can see the absolutely clear charges. And by the way, the Nunes memo is just the first memo. They're coming out with a second, third memos with much more detail. And I will say, from what I've heard, actually more damning in terms of the charges that are going to be laid at the feet of a number of individuals who were involved in this clear conspiracy, Mike, which a conspiracy that runs through the FBI, through the Department of Justice, through the White House, through the Clinton campaign and then this dirty PR firm called Fusion GPS, which created this fictional dossier with the help of this wonderful ex-British agent, Christopher Steele, who could be moonlighting as a fiction writer. But he was paid handsomely for that. GPS was paid 2 or 3 times for the same document. Even the FBI forked over money for it, if you can believe that. So this is an amazing thing in itself. But that's a real conspiracy, Mike. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's an actual conspiracy. And that's what the media don't want to talk about. They'll do anything to try to distract away from this story because it just dents and destroys the whole Russiagate narrative. And if this is discredited and people are held to account, anybody's held to account, the rest of the whole official Russian hacking or meddling conspiracy theory or collusion, it's going to collapse very quickly.
Well, we did discuss this on the Sunday Wire last night, so if anybody wants to hear a broader discussion of this, please go and have a look at 21stcenturywire.com.
That's right. We did a full-blown analysis on the memo and all the aspects of it in detail. There's also links to our written analysis as well, including pieces of the document up at 21stcenturywire.com. And in this special episode, Mike, we paid tribute to the late, great Robert Perry. And there's 2 rare interviews that I did with Robert Perry in 2016 and 2017, which are just completely relevant to the issues that we're talking about right now this week.
Now, last week, of course, we mentioned that the Houses of Parliament were going to be, the inhabitants were going to be decanted, the Houses of Parliament to be refurbished. But an interesting story appearing right across the mainstream media today, Patrick, and that is that there appear to be a number of Freemasonic lodges at work and in Westminster for politicians, but more interestingly, for journalists.
For journalists. So imagine this, a Freemason lodge for journalists who work in Parliament. Why would you want to have a lodge like that with that sort of specialization? I find that incredibly interesting, Mike. What else do we know about this?
Well, we've got the new Welcome Lodge, which was set up for MPs, peers and parliamentary staff. We've got Guardian there. We've got the United Grand Lodge of England saying that they're denying that there was any incompatibility between being a journalist or a politician and being a Freemason. I find this position to be utterly untenable. If you have, they can claim that they are no longer a secret society in the sense that everybody knows that they exist, but we don't know who their members are. Their members are not legally obliged to tell us whether they are members or not. So in that sense, it is a secret society. We don't know which politicians and which journalists are making funny handshakes together, and we don't know what deals are being done behind closed doors. But what I find fascinating is that this matter has appeared in the media at all. And so we were discussing this earlier this morning, Patrick, and we believe what's going on is that perhaps there's a bit of a common purpose Freemasonic spat going on. UK Column's been talking about this for a long time. Perhaps we're seeing this coming to the surface somewhat.
Could this be turf warfare? Is this effectively like gang warfare? So you have 2 competing secretive institutions vying for more power in the halls of government and in society in general, and both with their own agendas, let's say, that are quite possibly and likely and more probably independent of what the people and the public interests are. And the other thing I'm going to say about this as well, this isn't the first time we've seen Freemason scandals in the mainstream news in recent years, Mike, especially to do with the police and the judiciary. And what they found was that organized crime working through Masonic lodges was able to infiltrate the highest levels of the British justice system. And why is that, Mike? Because organized crime and Freemasonry are both sworn to secrecy. So in other words, it was impossible to find out what was going on because nobody was talking. So this is a recipe for disaster in terms of a functioning democracy. And I think that story, which came out, I think it was last year or the year before, really demonstrated that. But that is the problem. So when you have journalists colluding, editors, journalists, politicians, owners of publications, editors of publications in the same lodge as policymakers, journalists with their own lodge. This is all happening kind of under the radar, Mike. It does raise a lot of questions.
The United Grand Lodge of England said that the Gallery Lodge had 45 members, the Alfred Robbins Lodge had 18, the New Welcome Lodge had 40 members or so. I believe there were 4 lodges, and I don't know what the numbers are for the 4th one yet.
Yeah.
So we'll keep an eye on this.
And that's a Guardian article. I think that story appeared in the Guardian.
Well, it appeared in the Independent and a number of other
well.
media outlets as well. So it was quite widespread.
I encourage people to go look at that and read that article. It's very interesting.
Now we've got a brief update on Eugene Lukyanenko. Now, anybody that doesn't know this story, this is a concert pianist, a Ukrainian concert pianist living in the UK, had his son removed from him by Medway Social Services for the simple reason, as you can see on screen there, that the boy's grandfather and Eugene's father was a survivor from the death camps in Nazi Germany or in Ukraine, but Jewish death camps. That this was causing emotional harm to the child, and also that the father had experienced anti-Semitic treatment while he was in Eastern Europe as well. So this was causing a problem for the child. Therefore, Eugene was an unfit father, and the child had to be removed from him. This is the most unbelievable piece of child stealing by the state. Well, the update is that he has suspended his hunger strike. He's been on hunger strike for weeks. He suspended his hunger strike this week because Medway Council seemed to have made some positive noises, and he is hoping that will lead to a visit from his son. He has said, however, that if they go back on their word, that he will this time revert to a dry strike. In other words, no food, no nutrients, no water, and in that case he would be dead in a few days unless there's some forced intervention from the authorities. He was visited by a couple of people last week, over the weekend. He's still in a lot of pain because he's been on hunger strike for a long time, and so we will keep everybody updated on that case as we can. Now, in the meantime, National Cybersecurity Centre, active cyber defence 1 year on. They've been going for a year. They're very proud of themselves. They say that in November 2016, the UK government launched the new National Cybersecurity Centre strategy. This strategy had many effects, including setting up the National Cybersecurity Centre as part of GCHQ and giving it a mandate to pursue radical action required to better protect the UK's interests in cyberspace. So how have they been protecting the UK's interests in cyberspace? They've a number of interventions and real services, each free at the point of use, just like the National Health Service, so that's very good. They perform a particular security service for public sector organisations. First of all is a takedown service. So in 2017 they removed 18,067 unique phishing sites across 2,929 attack groups, apparently. They removed 121,000 unique phishing websites. They worked with 1,719 compromised sites in the UK that were being used to host attacks. And over the 12 months of 2017, the volume of these attacks has fallen, suggesting they say that criminals are using the UK government brand less and hosting fewer malicious attacks on UK government infrastructure. They say that they notified email providers of 3,243 advanced fee fraud attacks. Receiving an advanced fee fraud email, is that an attack, Patrick? Do you think is that classified as an attack? I do wonder about these numbers, because if the receiving of an email is considered an attack, well, it's not really, is it? Would
they account that in their statistics? Of course they would.
Yes. They've stopped several thousand mail servers from being used to impersonate government domains, they say. And they're saying that deceptive domains were registered with the sole intention of deceiving people, and that they've dealt with that as well. They've dealt with email problems. They've set up a thing called WebCheck, which performs simple tests on public sector websites to find security issues. This is all pretty basic stuff, I have to say. Between April and December last year, WebCheck performed 1,033,250 individual scans And on top of that, and this was the bit that I found slightly insidious, was they set up public sector DNS. So this is domain name servers to convert IP addresses to names to IP addresses. Specifically for the public sector. So any public sector network or organization that's using these domain name services, this is to provide protective services to public sector bodies, and it blocks access to known bad domains. What is the limit on that? What is the definition of a bad domain? Is somebody working in the public sector effectively behind a great firewall similar to the Chinese?
That's what it looks like they're constructing there. Certainly looks like it.
Yep. And they've also set up an integration platform, the Threat-O-Matic, apparently, that links all this active cyber defense measures and the early experiments they've done with others to prove event sharing and the benefits it could bring. In other words, data sharing. So good stuff. They're doing a good job. Let's keep it up. And Europol then has released a press release on remote access Trojans. This is some malware which, if you get it on your computer, can take over your webcam and your microphone and perhaps snoop on what you're doing. It seems to me that the biggest use of remote access Trojans is just anecdotal, just my own view, is in fact GCHQ and the NSA. So I wonder, is the National Cybersecurity Centre going to be protecting against their own activities?
So are you saying that caricature there with the black hat, is that not a Russian? Are you saying that might be someone in Cheltenham? Someone living inside a donut?
It could well be. It could well be. They're saying that a hacking tool allowing cyber criminals to remotely and surreptitiously gain complete control over a victim's computer is no longer available as a result of a UK-led operation targeting hackers linked to the remote access Trojan Luminosity link. Coordinated by the UK National Crime Agency and the support of Europol, this operation saw the involvement of over a dozen law enforcement agencies in Europe, Australia and North America. So that is fantastic news. They're stopping cyber criminals in their tracks right across Britain, Europe and the world.
All good.
We should feel safe.
Do you feel safer?
No.
Okay.
And indeed, I don't feel safer with this one either, because harnessing behavioural insights to tailor public services to citizens is the message that's being given out by the government today. They have long seen the benefits of using behavioural insights to tailor public services to citizens. And so they've set up the new CCS Behavioural Insights Framework, which offers suppliers a choice of suppliers, including small and medium-sized enterprises. So the agreement is going to be worth £16 million. 6 suppliers appointed to offer services, including 2 SMEs. Now, this has really been in the works since 2010 or so, when the government set up the Behavioural Insights team within the Cabinet Office. Well, that, of course, has been spun out into a mutual cooperative and operating on a commercial basis, selling services to the United States, Australia and other countries. But this new framework is available for use by central government departments and other public sector bodies, including NHS, trusts, schools, university, colleges, local authorities, the police and the fire services. Because we need to change people's behaviour, and we can't change people's behaviour unless we have insight into people's behaviour. So we gather the insight, which means lots of big data. We process that data and then we design our policies and our marketing agendas in order to promote those policies in such a way as to change people's behaviour, and then we can keep making sure that that's working by keeping the insights rolling in. We are just being watched on an ever-increasing basis.
And so so what you're saying, Mike, is the Behavioural Insights team gets all its insights from big data. Is that what you're saying? Well,
I'm saying that they're gathering the big data, which informs the algorithms which churn out the insights. They provide the insights to the civil service. And here's John Manzoni, the head of the civil service, saying behavioural insights have been part of our policy making at the heart of the government for a significant amount of time now. He is really impressed by it. He says this new framework will enable all public sector organisations to access this expertise, helping them to design efficient, effective public services that meet the real needs of citizens. Mm-hmm. Do you buy that?
You know, but this sounds like the technocracy, pure and simple. So computers are getting all the insights, and computers are telling our human politicians, most of them anyway, what the insights are. Isn't this bizarre? Computers are advising our elected officials. This is so strange.
Yes.
This reminds me of a book I once read. Anyway.
Who by?
Technocracy.
Inc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Patrick Wood.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Okay, Carillion, the government has announced that support is available for businesses and workers affected by the collapse of Carillion a couple of weeks ago. £100 million apparently of lending to small businesses through banks and other, what they're describing as delivery partners. So they're going to lend £100 million to small businesses that are in trouble, that may not have the security that they need to raise finance through conventional bank lending. So they're not going to bail out any of the small businesses the way that they bailed out the banks in 2007, 2008. No, that type of bailout is not available. We've got another type of bailout, but the type of bailout that's available to small businesses has to be paid back. Loans.
Of
course. So Greg Clark, very happy with this. He said, we want to signal very clearly to small and medium-sized businesses who were owed money by Carillion that they will not get their money from Carillion. Instead, they're going to have to borrow in order to meet their needs, and they'll be supported to continue trading. It's not really good enough.
Not much to smile about with that plan, Greg, I think.
No.
It's not good. Not a good deal for small to medium-sized enterprises. Why do these businesses have to borrow the money when bigger companies just get given the money, Mike? It just doesn't seem right. Should be the other way around.
You would have thought so.
Yeah.
And we'll just end on this one. This was a bit of fake news pushed out by ITV News today. Not the story itself, because the story's real, but the way that it was presented here on Twitter, because we shouldn't be using social media to push around fake headlines, Patrick, should we? Well,
that's against all the new rules about what Theresa May outlined in her fake news task force. They're very worried about this sort of very phenomenon. Is this not what we're seeing here, Mike?
Absolutely. So what they tweeted out was that Lloyds becomes first UK banking giant to ban customers from buying Bitcoin. And they didn't qualify what the nature of the ban was. So the implication from that is that it's a blanket ban, that somehow Lloyds can ban anybody from doing anything, which of course they can't. What this is actually about is people buying Bitcoins on using their credit cards. And quite reasonably, probably Lloyds are concerned that the Consumer Credit Act would leave them liable to any losses that somebody would experience as a result of potential losses as a result of buying Bitcoins on a credit card.
Common sense.
So Lloyds is quite happy if you want to go and speculate with Bitcoin using your debit card. That's no problem, because debit cards don't have the same protections as credit cards. So this piece of this tweet here, yet another piece of fake news from the mainstream media.
From ITV.
Yes.
Not that they've ever done fake news in the past, have they? But that's interesting, Mike. So, our point is, with this whole fake news controversy and the fight against fake news, which a lot of politicians are getting a lot of mileage out of these days to be seen to look busy, does the mainstream media factor in to their strategies at all? Because with the amount of reach that these companies like the BBC have, newspapers like The Times, The Guardian, and the tabloids, and Channel 4 and ITV, the amount of collective reach they have, isn't that more of a crisis when they put out fake news and create fictional headlines, Mike? Does that not do more damage for this so-called crisis than a few marginal Facebook posts by some teenagers in Macedonia working in their basements, playing PlayStation at the same time? I asked this to Theresa May and her crack task force team. What are you doing about the mainstream media's fake news?
Well, they may not be able to answer, because we're not actually sure whether the existence of this crack task force is itself not a piece of fake news, because as we reported on Friday, Tom Watson was asking questions in the House of Commons about this new crack task force, and unfortunately the government was not able to provide any answers. So we wait to see with that one. It's interesting you mentioned Macedonia. There are big protests in Greece over the weekend over the deal that's been done over the name of Macedonia and its use. So we'll keep an eye on that in case it kicks off something broader.
Yeah, that's an interesting story. Macedonia 2.0.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
With a copyright with a C with a circle around it.
Okay, that's it for today. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for joining us, Patrick. We will be back at the same time tomorrow. Brian will be back with us then. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.